In this lesson, we'll talk about transforming our objects, so moving, rotating, and scaling those 3D objects. So I've just got this gear loaded up and I've converted it to a poly mesh. I'm in edit mode. So now what I'd like to do is kind of move this around on our canvas. So there are several ways that you can move objects around in your ZBrush canvas. One of the ways is within the tool palette. There's a subpalette called deformation, which we'll talk about more later, but I want to concentrate on kind of these top row items right in here, right under resim, this offset, rotate, and scale. So this, in combination with 3 axis buttons here on the side, will let you move, rotate, and scale. So if I want to move something or rotate it, I can just select a particular axis. For instance, here, rotate in the Z-axis, and I can rotate that around. Okay. If I want to choose a different axis, I just select that axis and I can rotate it that way. Okay. I can also scale it. So in this case, it's called size. And if I want to scale it uniformly, I would have every axis selected, and then I could make that larger or smaller. Now, one thing you'll notice is right now the value is set to 0, and if I go ahead and increase that by, let's say, 40 and let go, it's going to zero that back out. So there's no really memory of any kind of transforms on that. Same thing with rotation. Now I can rotate it 88 degrees, but it goes right back to 0, and I have no really indication of how many degrees I actually rotated that, and if I want to be able to take it back to 0, that can be an issue. Okay, and same thing with the offset. You know, if I want to kind of move it over in the X, I move it minus 100, goes back to 0. I don't really know, if I don't remember how many I offset it, then I don't really know how far I've taken that. And so this can be a great way to move things, and especially relationship to one another when you've got multiple tools together. I actually do use this quite a bit. But that's one of the downfalls, is that you don't have really an exact measurement like you would in something like Maya or 3ds Max, where it's more of a 3D centric application. Okay, now another method that you can use to move objects is to actually use the move, scale, and rotate tools up here. So if I choose move, it's going to allow us to draw out this transpose tool. You can see it's kind of a ring on one end and a line and then a ring on another end, and you can see it here. And so we draw this out from one side to the other. And then if I grab the center, I can just move it around in my scene. Okay. If I grab this end and move it, I'm actually kind of stretching it from one end to the other. Okay. You can see here I can grab this, and selecting different parts of this do different things. I can actually grab this to kind of roll around the camera view. If I go to scale, and I grab this end ring, I can actually scale it uniformly. Whereas if I grab this middle ring, I can start to scale it down and stretch it if I move along that axis. If I go to rotate, I can rotate it, and the rotation point is the first point that you clicked. And then the second point is what you're rotating around. So I could come in here, and if I wanted to rotate it around this spot, I could rotate it around that spot. Or if I wanted to rotate it around the middle, I could kind of rotate it around that spot. Okay, so this is good for, you know, really interactively coming in and positioning things, scaling them. You can use move to sort of deform it if you want to, or you can kind of move it around. And it's all using this transpose line, the action line also. But you can see here, it'll give you the status line, will give you an indication, also gives you an indication of the length. So, you know, I can see how many units long this is, and then I can bring it out. Okay, I can also, you know, if I hold down shift, as it says, it'll give me a straight line, and then if I hold down shift, I can just drag it along a particular axis. Same thing here. So there's a lot of power in our transpose line here. I can also click on the different axes to automatically align those with a particular axis if I want to move it in a particular direction. Okay, and that's accessed, and you can see the hotkeys for that, W, E, and R, or you can select those buttons yourself. Now another method, the last method that we'll talk about, is actually located under the geometry subpalette, and here you'll find 2 options for position and size. So position, this will actually allow you to move the position, and so I can, you know, zero this out, and then if I want to move it, I want to move it, you know, 5, let's just say 5 in the X, this will actually remember that 5. So if I'm doing some work and I actually want to zero this back out, I don't have to kind of remember what I did. I can go back into position, say, oh, you know, I moved it 5 units over, so I'm going to go ahead and zero that out. Just take that back to 0. So this has a little bit more of a memory to it as far as your transforms go. Same thing with size. You know, right now this is 4.8. I can size that up to 5 and then maybe go up to 10 and go back down to 1. So I have a lot more control and also understand, you know, where it was before versus where it is now, and it just gives you a little bit more of flexibility when you need to go back and go back and move it into a previous location or something like that. So check that out as well. That's in the geometry subpalette, position and size. So you can use that. You can use the deformation subpalette. You could use the move, scale, and rotate along with the transpose lines to actually transform your models by moving them, making it bigger or smaller, or rotating them around. All right, so we'll be using these tools as we go through this process, but I just want to kind of expose you very briefly to them before we get into anything more complex. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is subdividing our geometry. So that's a big part of in ZBrush, taking the geometry that we have and being able to sculpt it. We need to have very high resolution, very dense mesh to be able to create all of that cool detail. And subdividing is what makes that happen. So in the next lesson, we'll go through the process of subdividing our geometry and how to move up and down those subdivision levels so that we can work efficiently.